take blood from the left side of the body and return it to the right. So we only have a left brachiocephalic vein, okay? So we can see that right here. It's about this little 3-inch patch right before it joins into the superior vena cava. Okay, so again, we only have a left brachiocephalic vein and a right brachiocephalic artery, and it just has to do with where the blood needs to go in this area. It's what's most efficient. Now if we were to follow this brachiocephalic, just as we saw with the brachiocephalic in the arterial system, this you're going to see split into one vessel that goes into the head, one vessel that goes into the arm. The one that goes into the arm is also called the subclavian. So brachiocephalic and subclavian, those names match. The one that goes into the head, though, is the jugular. Okay? So the two going into the head, if it's an artery, it's the common carotid. If it's a vein, it's the common jugular. Okay? And I think on yours it just says jugular, so you may not need to know common. Oh, you just need to know external jugular. Okay, so we'll just call this the external jugular. Okay. So on the exam, just so you guys know, if you were to put jugular or external jugular for this guy, I would mark those both correct. Okay? Just based on the inconsistencies. Technically, this is just the common jugular or the jugular, but since your sheet only needs you to know external jugular, then I'd accept both. But we're going to be talking about this one here. All right. Okay. Everyone doing okay so far? Great. So we're going to move into the arm now. So we're going to jump to the subclavian, which again is this guy right here. Now, the subclavian, the marker that we're going to use for this when it starts changing names is the collarbone, okay? So as soon as it passes underneath the clavicle, this is both for the venous and arterial system, okay? Once it passes underneath the clavicle and it's in the shoulder region, that's when it becomes axillary, okay? So remember, axillary is kind of like your armpit region. So as soon as it goes underneath that clavicle and it's in the shoulder, that's axillary, okay? Now it's going to switch from axillary to brachial once it's in the arm proper. So in this guy, you can see like here's kind of the armpit region, and then here when we have like the big fat muscle, you can still see the vessel going in, so it would be maybe like the last 2 inches of this would be brachial, and the rest of what you see in here underneath the clavicle still would be axillary. All right? And with this guy, I think we only have the vein on this side. Yeah, we can only see the veins on this guy, okay? So you don't have the arteries on this model. For the arteries, we're going to use these ones, okay? So you'll see that you have the arterial system in the arms and legs following the same lines that we have the nerves going. So it's kind of easy to memorize the arm and the leg for the nerve and the vessels together because it's very, very connected that way. So with this guy, here on top you can see we have the scapula coming around on our clavicle right here. So if we look in the front, you can see there's just like this little tiny bit of it. Actually, it's all underneath the clavicle. So we don't have a subclavian on this one. It just immediately starts as axillary, okay? So the axillary is going to be about the first 3 inches of this. After that, once we're in the arm, it's brachial, all right? Now you'll see that after that next kind of 3-inch chunk, it splits again. That split is going to be the split into the radial and the ulnar, okay? And if you look on your sheet, you'll notice that for radial and ulnar, you only need to know the arteries, not the veins. And that's because these models only show the arteries. And these are the models that we're going to be looking at this most on, okay? So once it breaks, if you follow these, you can see one goes closer to the thumb. That's going to be the radial. One's closest to the pinky. That'll be our ulnar, okay? Any questions about that? All right, so we talked about the common carotid already, so we're good there. The last one that we're going to talk about that is an artery and above the diaphragm, because everything we've been talking about, if you haven't noticed, above the diaphragm, intercostals. So the costals, we know, are the ribs from previous segments that we've done. And if you look at the ribs, you can see that there's a vein and artery running along the length of the ribs. Those are the intercostals. Okay, so it's just the vessels running along the ribs. And again, you'll find those in the chest plates. All right, one more vein to talk about before we move on to below the diaphragm. That's the azygos. So if you look at the back vertebrae like by the vertebrae. It's in this model on the left-hand side. You can see that there is a vein running along the vertebrae parallel to the aorta. That's the azygos. So it's very, very deep. It runs parallel to the aorta on the left side of this model. And that's the azygos, and that's a vein. Now, a quick thing to note for this section in general, for the practicum, it's going to be really important that you remember to put whether the vessel that's stickered is an artery or a vein. Okay? The general convention for depicting arteries versus veins in the models is that arteries are red, veins are blue. Okay? The reason that that's the convention is because it's really showing oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood is shown as red, deoxygenated blood is shown as blue. And I'm explaining that now because when we get to the heart and we talk a little bit about the pulmonary system, you'll see that that kind of switches because in the pulmonary system, you're actually having deoxygenated blood run through the arteries and oxygenated blood run back to the heart through the veins, okay? The name vein versus artery doesn't refer to whether it's oxygenated or deoxygenated. It's referring to whether it's leaving the heart or going to the heart, okay? That's kind of the difference between those two names. So really be cognizant of whether you're putting artery or vein and what the convention is for that, okay? Because red may not always be artery. Okay, so like I said, everything we're going to be talking about now is below the diaphragm. The first thing that we have is the celiac, and that's going to be in the artery, the arterial system. So you can see right after the diaphragm, we have our abdominal aorta, and there's a bunch of vessels that pull off of this abdominal aorta. That's what we're going to be focusing on. This list, starting at the celiac, working our way all the way down to the femoral and the arterial side, those are in order as how they come off of the abdominal aorta. So the first thing that we're going to see coming off is the celiac. The celiac is actually most commonly referred to as the celiac trunk because it's a place where 3 vessels come off of the aorta. So right after the diaphragm, and this is actually the best model for it, it's the only model that shows it, so do make sure you see the celiac in this model. Right after the diaphragm, you can see that there's a cluster of 3 arteries pulling off of the aorta. If we were to put a sticker right in the middle of this, we'd be asking for the celiac. Okay? Now, we're not going to be asking you to identify each one of the vessels. I don't know why, but you only need to know one of the vessels that comes off. And the one vessel that comes off is the splenic. Okay? And I can't for the life of me remember which one it is, and I didn't remember from my first class, so I'm just going to conventionally tell you it's one of these, and you're going to believe me, okay? So it's the one on the bottom left side, okay? And again, it's really not that important because we're not naming the other ones, so if we put